Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, Joey McGuire and the Red Raiders made a habit out of pulling off the improbable a season ago. We'll talk about the odds of doing the same in 2023, including fourth down marbles. Get used to it. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Everything runs through Lubbock.
Always glad to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. And Chris, kicking off today's show with something I think that's going to be kind of fun to talk about. It was certainly fun to watch it a season ago. And we'll ask some questions about what we can expect to see in 2023. If you were a Red Raider football fan taking in last season, you're going to probably know exactly what we're talking about as we get into Texas Tech overachieving. There were some of those games, Chris, and clearly this is part of what made the season so exciting, where you really felt like your back was against the wall. Sometimes you even felt like you were down and out within the game. This thing could be over. And we've got about a decade's worth of recent history to give Tech fans good reason to feel like, all right, ring the bell. This thing is going nowhere. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say, Joey McGuire and his team never got that memo. And they were down a few times, but seemingly never out. As we saw some comebacks, we saw some improbable things happen in the fourth quarter, in overtime, and a lot of that against statistically what you would think should happen. I don't know how many times we wrapped up a game and then got back together on Monday, and you and I said, man, if you looked at the box score, you wouldn't have thought it was going this way on the scoreboard, but a lot of times it did in a positive way for Texas Tech. And at least that was one thing visibly that changed, I think, Chris, in year one. Was winning close games, the ability to really hang tight and persevere. And then you did get over the hump and you won some of those close games that had really plagued you, going back the last 10 years or so. You hadn't been able to do that.
Yeah, you sent me a piece that included a lot of the analytics or the win probability numbers and just some different formulas, I guess, that kind of suggested that Texas Tech shouldn't have won as many of these close games based on the formula and the percentages and just things like that.
Right.
And usually that's the tell on whether your season really has a chance to be special or not. I go back to like to localize it. I go back to the year that Texas Tech went to the Final Four. Well, I'm going to go back to even the year before that. When you went to the Elite Eight that first year and you kind of pushed through, it was the year before where you had lost a ton of close games. And the year after, when you ended up going to the Elite Eight and you lose to Villanova in Boston, that was a year where all of a sudden you were winning those close ones. A lot of that had to do with Keenan Evans, okay? And you had a player that was making plays at the end and down the stretch, and it was winning time, and he came through for you. I go back from a football standpoint. Let's go back to, because that's kind of when you look at it, they weren't all close, but there was a lot of close losses, like when Matt Wells was as the head coach. And that's the difference between, getting a second contract or, getting, being told, hey, we're going to go in a different direction, honestly. And like, I look at TCU last year. I mean, they kept tempting fate every Saturday but they just kept winning all the close ones. Now, the Georgia one wasn't close, but the Michigan one was. Then they didn't win the close one versus Kansas State to win the Big 12 championship, but all the other ones they were on the right side. And we remember the wild finish in Waco when they beat Baylor. But Texas Tech was able to, and I'll tell you, if I could, we'll get into the other reasons why you won these close games here in a little bit. But one reason that I think that as much as anything on why you won close games last year, and I think it's it's a question mark this year. Is Trey Wolff. I
Indeed.
mean, 21 of 25. He only misses in the 40 to 49 yard range. He had a couple of 50+ yard field goals, and then he made, and this is the key, he made every makeable field goal, like ones that you just had to have, that you're in the distance. So like, okay, we got to get 3 points. He made all of those. He was perfect, between 0 and 40 yards, I guess. He did not miss. And when you got, again, it goes back to that bird in the hand. When you've got 3 in your back pocket, you got, and you're getting the points that you're supposed to get, winning those close ones is much easier, because if you miss one of those and you left with nothing, it's a momentum change. It's not, you've got to, battle back and get everybody motivated, and you can't go back and re-kick it, So that is a key point I wanted to make sure that is made here, is that Trey Wolff had a lot to do with winning those close ones.
Man, you hit the nail on the head. And of course, I'm sure if you're a football fan, no matter what your team is, you may have had a season here or there where you had the opposite of that, and a kicker was making you pull your hair out from week to week because you weren't reliable in that category. But yeah, you see it on the screen. We're going to get to some of what Joey McGuire and company did on 4th down that really allowed you to get over these humps in some type spots on occasion. But Trey Wolff is, I don't know, either number 1 or number 2 on that list among those 2 things, probably the top 2 reasons as to why, aside from, just intestinal fortitude and things like that, that keep you in the mix late in the ball game, but cannot diminish the role that he played. And as Chris was alluding to there, I don't know what these statistics are worth to you out there. They're really not worth a whole lot to me, but I think sometimes they can be revealing. And some of the ways that they were looking at these things, as far as statistically speaking, was like, if you looked at the game picture when it was completed and you forget about the final score, but you're thinking, all right, statistically, what's the percentage or what's the odds for this team or that team to be the winner here? Just a couple of examples. Texas Tech, after the Oklahoma game, had a 39% post-game win expectancy based on what you saw there in the box score. Texas, would you like to take a guess at what the Texas number was? Because it's a single-digit number. 2%. That's what they would have given you as far as your odds of winning that game whenever you paint that statistical picture that you do. But stats are for losers, Chris, and I think that still remains accurate. And those are games, particularly the Texas game, in a lot of ways, those are games that paint that picture and tell you that it's not all about what those numbers bear out, aside from obviously the most important ones on the scoreboard. I'd even go back, to like the Houston game, I think, as well. And you got to go Rudy T. What Tom Janovich told us, the heart of a champion is something that you can't define within a statistical category. And I think we saw some of that. Again, back to some of that intestinal fortitude. And I credit the coaching staff. You credit the on-the-field leadership. Obviously, everybody involved, because you got to be pulling in the same direction in those very tight moments to have success like they were able to do.
I go back to, I guess it was in Raleigh. I think you're down 20-0. It's Saturday night. It's sold out. It's not going well. I think, like I said, you're down 20-0. And then and that was a top 10, top 15 NC State team at the time. And then you battle back and make this basically a 1-score game toward the end before they ended up pulling away and get some things done against you. But there's many times before where you've seen a Texas Tech team just kind of, it's just not going to happen. I look at the Kansas State game on the road last year, and Kansas State was rolling, and they kind of got up on you, and I thought, oh man, I've seen this movie before. But you battled back, you just kept swinging, and I think that's a credit to Joey. Joey has the ability to tap into these kids, because I will say this: he's as loved as any coach that I can remember, including Mike. Okay, internally, like by his players, but people may misunderstand that a bit, because if you go watch him, he coaches hard. Like, he is not afraid to get on anybody, whether it be a coach or a player, and he coaches hard. And when I say hard, like, not polite at times. Okay, like he's going to get in your face and tell you about it, but then he loves them up as much as that, or even harder, whether it be a coach or a player. And that's the secret. That's the secret sauce. And the love and the positive vibes, they carry on, and all the in between. And so I think that's worth something here. Like in a conversation like this, man, I think it's worth something when you talk about guys just hang in there and keep swinging and play hard for a guy, because they don't quit, they don't flinch.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd thing, but as you get older and you look back at teachers or coaches or whatever it might be that you remember fondly, and personally, probably the favorite coach I ever had was the one that was the quickest to go nose to nose with you if it was necessary. But for some reason, you're able to strike that balance, and some of the really good ones are able to do that. And no surprise that Joey McGuire is really able to do that. I think we saw, some come into that spot and they would preach it, they would talk about it. Does it really happen? I don't know. You do find out when your back is against the wall, and we found out some things when their back was against the wall a season ago. As for the second entry, or one of the top two entries on that list as to why Texas Tech was able to find success, fourth down marvels. I mean, that was as discussed of a talking point, I think, as there was for Texas Tech football throughout the season last year. Made it a lot of fun to watch. I mean, you had some of the wildest days I've ever seen as far as fourth down is concerned. And going back to that UT game, that's the that's the poster child for this conversation, I guess. 6 for 8 that day on fourth downs. Tech went for it 52 times overall, Chris. That was by far the most in the nation. They converted 33 of those 52. And here's where it breaks down even more and gets a little more interesting. 129 points for Texas Tech after those 33 conversions. The 19 failures, they allowed only 44 points. So what they're calling that is a profit of 85 points, and almost worth, as it averages out, a touchdown per game over 13 ball games. So it's fun to talk about because it worked out well for you last season. But I think we all know it doesn't always work out well. And then all of a sudden it's a much different conversation. I wanted to start this part of our conversation by asking you, Chris, do you think, was this really like the plan? Like, hey, anytime we're in this situation, this is our personality, this is our identity. Was it just what the season and some of these games called for? I guess I'm kind of wondering, how much should I expect this to be replicated again in 2023? Or should I maybe tap the brakes and consider that it's just case by case, and maybe you don't have those same cases in 2023? What do you think overall? Was this part of their identity, really an intentional part of their identity? But first, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook of Locked On. And right now is the perfect time to take your first swing and bet with FanDuel, because you could get 10 times your first bet amount back in bonus bets, up to $200. That's right. Just bet 20 and you're landing $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line, over-unders, or anything in between, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. Download it today in the App Store or head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And of course, when you're a winner with FanDuel, you're getting paid instantly. Just one of the many reasons why FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, and start the fun today with FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Kind of wondering, how much should I expect this to be replicated again in 2023? Or should I maybe tap the brakes and consider that it's just case by case, and maybe you don't have those same cases in 2023? What do you think overall? Was this part of their identity, really an intentional part of their identity?
To answer your question, I would tell you this is as much about being the brand as anything else.
Okay.
I think, it's here to stay unless they get information or the analytics suggest, for whatever reason, not to go for it as much. But I think that they use that third party. They meet with them weekly. that company that really analyzes this stuff and kind of, tells you what the sweet spot is and all that. And we got into these conversations last year with Coach McGuire on his coach's show. Does he have the ability to kind of alter from the book and go with his gut and, based on weather, based on, is this kicker pull a groin? Is his quarterback not feeling great? Whatever the case may be, that they have the ability to go off script a bit. But I think for the most part, this is what you're going to continue to see. And I don't know if the percentages, because they converted 51 of them. Is that right?
52.
52 fourth downs last year.
Well, I'm sorry. They attempted 52, converted 33.
Okay, yeah. But it was like 62%, I think, is like they converted 62% of the time, which was, I think, tops of the country. I think going for it 52 times was tops in the country.
Yeah. And
I think I don't know if you can expect to live in the 62% conversion rate. Okay.
We're gonna be living good if we are.
Yeah. But I think that if it's close to that, it's just the numbers suggest, we're going to take the good with the bad. And here's the mind trick with this whole thing. Not all fourth down conversions are created equally. It's one thing if you're going for it. Because I tell you, when it would make me nervous as just sitting there analyzing this thing, when you're behind by 2 scores and you come out of the locker room in the second half and it's that first drive and you're on your own, say, 35-yard line, and it's like foot on the gas, go for it. And I'm thinking, because if you don't convert it, the game can kind of get away with. You can almost not really, but you can theoretically kind of end it right there. You give a team on your 35-yard line, they go in and score, and now you're down 3 scores, and it's just like you're compounding the problem. So they're not all created equally. The mind trick, though, is that it's with Tim DeRuyter and his group. Okay, that's really the whole thing. In both instances, when I've sat here and told you, you give the team the ball on your own 35 and you're down 2 scores, it puts them in a bind. However, you go for it on 4th and 2 at the 2-yard line, you don't get it. They're in a bit of a better spot there. But that's the group that I think was mature and handled it the best. Because it's kind of a no-win situation for Tim. And I think had he been a younger coordinator, he probably would have gone to Joey and be like, man, I'm not cool with this, man. It's killing our stats. We're putting our team in a bind all the time. All the stuff, but football has changed. And I think Tim's an older guy and experienced, and I think he sees the value. And I've had multiple conversations with him about it. And I love his mindset because he calls them, hey, there's a fire out there. We're the firemen. Bring your hose. Yeah, bring your hose, dog. So, that's, and they kind of have that mentality, and I think it works, and so, and Zach Kitley deserves some credit as well for the play calls on 4th down and converting those, because that's a bit tricky. And it always comes down to some involvement with the QB run game. Maybe too much to some people's liking, but the QB run game on 4th and short or whatever, whether it's an option look or whatever, that's always going to be fairly prevalent there, just because it's safe. And if you go QB power or whatever you're doing, it's hard to put a hat on the quarterback because you've got him outmanned.
Well, it's safe for you, I guess, if you can call anything safe. But I also feel like, man, it presents so many different options to the defense that they got to be thinking about in that instant. And we've been thrashed by it so many times, is maybe why I feel that way, watching a Texas Tech defense get taken advantage of. But I don't mind that at all. And I love DeRuyter's approach. Look, the game of football is a bind. It's about dealing with the bind. And so if you're just worried about, we're in a short field, what will we do now? I mean, where are you going to go? And yeah, I didn't forget the comment from a season ago when he was talking about, we're here to put out the fire every time. Doesn't matter where. on the field. We're coming on out like George Strait, making our rounds all over town, putting out offensive possessions. That doesn't roll off the tongue as well. So I think his line was better. But the one I'm just having still some trouble digesting, Chris, I like your scenario too, because you're sitting there thinking, is this smart football to do something like that? Obviously, if it doesn't work out. If it does, you're a genius. But there are some of those also, man, in the first quarter before like anything's even happened. You're not even behind the 8 ball, but all of a sudden you're going on 4th down on your own 27 or something like that. I'm like, here we go. Rev it up. I just got into the recliner with my first brew, and we're already like pushing our chips to the middle of the table. There's a lot to like about it. There's some things you might regret about it here or there, but I'm happy to ride with it. I don't mind that approach. And the one thing I always like to see from a coach or anybody in any position of leadership is them sticking to what they want to do. Yep. I mean, obviously we know nothing's going to be perfect. Nothing's going to work out 100% of the time. So if you're going to go down doing what you think is the approach that should be taken. That's what you're getting paid the big bucks for. Certainly made it exciting. And yeah, 62%, boy, you'd be cooking with gas if you're near that in 2023. Maybe the number you'd like to impact overall, though, is the 52. How about don't have to go for it 52 times in 2023? You know, stay ahead of the change. We could consider that to a degree as well. I know easier said than done. Okay, let's wrap it up with some of those guys who are going to be in charge of that task. We're going to get to some of the firemen we mentioned, but also some of those looking to stay ahead of the change because Joey McGuire has put out the bird call. Big 12 Media Days just around the corner, and we now know the posse that will be mounting up, and we'll get to it next on Locked On Texas Tech. Glad to have you along for the ride on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network with Chris. I'm Casey. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. Big 12 Media Days is just around the corner as we will get down to the nitty-gritty of talking season, at least. This is like the conference championship game of talking season. We've all been talking amongst ourselves up to this point in time. Now we'll gather and we'll talk together before finally strapping it on and getting pads to popping when fall camp does arrive. But we got to learn finally this week, Chris, who was going to be representing the Red Raiders at Big 12 Media Days. You got some offensive and defensive flavor. No surprise, Tyler Shuck is going to be in the mix. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago when he was named as the starting quarterback, that maybe there was some intention there in order to get him in this spot at Big 12 Media Days. Otherwise, offensively, his compadres, Jerron Bradley and Taj Brooks. And then on the defensive side, you're bringing the cornerstones, the foundations. They are the I-beams of this Texas Tech defensive building. And Jalen Hutchings and Tony Bradford Jr. Quality group here, guys that know what this program is trying to be all about. And excited to hear from them, man. I think you've got some great representatives here.
Yeah, you know, and Tony Bradford went last year in a bit of a different capacity. He didn't actually participate in like the media day stuff. He was there for like the committee for champions, or there was some sort of deal. So that he's a no-brainer. You know, and I think that this event or this kind of thing is exactly why the decision was leaked out that Tyler Shuck had been named the starting quarterback because of something just like this. I think Tyler will excel mightily in a setting like this. I think he will represent Texas Tech about as good as you could want from a polished student athlete that is going to say the right thing and all those things. And again, he may give somebody some bulletin board material, not say the boring thing either. Like he said after last year when they beat. Remember when he was feeling it after the the Oklahoma game. He's like, man, not even everybody in this hallway believed in me. And I mean, he was just. But this is who he is, man. He's an alpha, but he's very polished with it, and I think he's very motivated. And so anyway, I love that he's getting to go. Taj makes a ton of sense. Jalen Hutchings makes a ton of sense. I was trying to think, you know, it's a fun exercise to try to project who you think would go and represent the team. One, do they portray themselves well? Two, have they been around a bit, and are they a known quantity? And you know, as far as being a player and with some background on their resume. I think Sir Roderick went last year, great representative as well. So I love that Taj is getting to go. I would have thought that maybe Rabbit would have been a guy that would have had a chance to be in this conversation, Dadrion Taylor Demerson, but he went last year, you know, and so they're trying to spread the wealth a little bit. And Jerron Bradley, I mean, he was a freshman All-American last year. So if you're going to take – because I think initially they only announced the 4 guys, and then I think you start to see what other Big 12 teams are doing, and they decide everybody's bringing a 5th. And so Jerron Bradley makes a ton of sense as well. Maybe one of your starting corners, you know, Rayshad or Malik. Don't know if Rayshad has actually been cleared or anything yet. He's still maybe doing a little bit of rehab from sports hernia surgery. They're trying to keep Malik Dunlap back here working hard and, you know, and all that. So, but I think that's a no-brainer kind of group, and you've got some age that you're taking with you for sure. Because the Dre McCrays, Dennis Wilburn would have been great, you know, if you were taking an lineman, you know, I think would have been great in this capacity.
And he's an MC, so he knows how to handle the mic.
Yes, he does. Dennis the Menace. So, yeah.
I thought about Miles Price, but did he go last year too?
I believe so, because I think there was a picture of Miles Price and Tyree Wilson standing next to each other.
Yes.
And it looks like the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito.
Yeah, I was going to say father-son, but your example's better. I don't know if Miles will like that all that much. If you get
I remember I think I was sitting there hosting the coaches show last year, and Miles was my guest. And I think Sir Roderick texted me that picture and said, "Show Miles this." And so I like show it to him, and I'm laughing, and he's like, you know, he got all offended, and so I was showing it to the crowd, and Miles had fun with it. Miles is like the happiest go lucky guy that's kind of the life of the party vibe guy that you know he's great, but he played along with it. But it was stark difference there in the size. So.
There also be some stark differences among the contingencies and representatives as far as, you know, hearing from them as members of the media. I used to love to go sit in the room whenever Bill Snyder was going to be at the podium. You knew he was going to drop some pearls, probably just make you a better person if you'd pay attention, take some notes, sit up straight, keep your eyes open. He was the tops for me. Nobody else was ever really appointment listening as far as the big room was concerned with head coaches. I like to hear what Gary Patterson had to say because I certainly respected him as a football coach. But Joey McGuire and the Red Raider contingency, Chris, have got to be at the top of the list as far as people that media members want to put mics in front of. And I know that it's particularly Joey McGuire, but I don't know. I'm trying to think who else is going to be in attendance that will be such a curiosity. I think certainly Sonny Dykes, after the season he had, might fall in that category. But Steve Sarkisian, he's probably got the Burt Reynolds clause walking through the hallways. Don't even look him in the eyes or he's going to call you a motherfucker right in front of your family, hopefully on national television if he can have it the way he wants it. I think that's why they have an LHN crew there in attendance just in case he wants to scream at anybody and put it on video. But I think Joey McGuire is probably going to be the must-have ticket, the must-watch portion of this Big 12 Media Day. I am a little biased. But tell me I'm wrong. I mean, it's going to be a Joey McGuire show, I think.
It's okay to be biased, man. That's what we do here. We try to keep it real most of the time, but yeah, it's okay to this is
going to be July 12th, July 13th. That's a Wednesday and Thursday. If you're interested in these kind of things, didn't used to do this. Kind of cool now that ESPNU, ESPN Plus will offer some coverage there if you want to take some of this in. July 12th. July 13th. Do we know yet which day Tech is on? I'm not sure. Has that been decided?
I believe they're on the Thursday. They're on the second of the 2 days, yes.
So coming up around the corner, keep an eye out for Big 12 Media Days there from the Metroplex. All right, and keep an eye out for us to be back on the other side, wrapping up the week with you once again. Looking forward to it. Chris, always appreciate the time, man. Enjoyed it once again today.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Appreciate it. Keep hope alive, everybody.
Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. And we hope to see you again for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.